Morning light spilled through the blinds of a small house on the edge of Austin, Texas. Dust floated in the quiet air, catching gold in the beams. Margaret Cole sat by the window, stirring her coffee long after it had gone cold. It was Sunday, her husband's favorite day. He'd been gone 3 years now, but the chair across from her was still set, as if he might walk in, apologize for being late, and make her laugh again. The house had once been full of noise, children, the scent of soup simmering, the low hum of his country records. Now it was just the tick of a clock and the distant echo of her own breathing. At 58, Maggie told herself she was content, retired from nursing, stable pension, good health. But at night, when she turned off the lights, a hollow ache filled the silence. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the feeling of fading, as if the world had moved on and forgotten she existed. One evening, while scrolling through a Facebook group for retired nurses abroad, she noticed a post. "Any Texans here ever been to Indonesia? I'm thinking of visiting." A profile named Rian Surya replied with a photo, a tanned man with deep-set eyes and a smile that felt alive. He wrote, "Indonesia is a place that heals broken hearts. I could show you mine if you ever come." It was the kind of line she would have rolled her eyes at years ago. But that night, she found herself replying. The messages started small. Jokes about Texas heat versus Indonesian rain, recipes, music. Then longer notes about loss, dreams, and aging. He said he was 38, an artist who'd once lived in Houston for a semester. He spoke of painting women, not as they are, but as they feel. She hadn't realized how easily he slipped into her life. A good morning text, a call before bed. His voice through the speaker was calm, low, magnetic. When he laughed, it felt like someone had opened a window inside her chest. "You make me forget how old I am," she told him once, half embarrassed. He paused. "Age doesn't exist where love lives, Maggie." Something in the way he said her name, slow, tender, claiming, made her heart stutter. Days blurred into weeks. He began sending her photos. The market outside his apartment, a canvas mid-paint, his hand holding a mug that looked identical to hers. She started to imagine the scent of the spices he described, the sound of rain on his balcony. When he sent her a video of himself painting, shirtless, light falling across his collarbone, a small scar visible near his shoulder, she watched it 3 times before replying. Then came the question that tilted her world. "You said you wanted to see the ocean again. Come here, let me show you mine." She laughed at first. But he was serious. He spoke of villas, beaches, fresh air, a place where no one knows your past, only your heart. For days, she hesitated. Then she caught her reflection in the mirror, soft lines, eyes still kind but dulled by years of safety. And she thought, what if this is my last chance to feel something real? That night, she opened her laptop and booked the flight. When she told her daughter, Lila, she framed it as an adventure. Just a little vacation. "I need some sun," she said, omitting the part about Rian. Lila worried, of course, but Maggie laughed it off. "You forget I was an ER nurse. I can handle anything." Still, when she hung up, her hands trembled. On the night before departure, she packed her old white suitcase, folded dresses she hadn't worn in years, a floral perfume, a framed photo of her late husband. She placed it face down. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Rian. "I'll be waiting at the airport, love. Don't be afraid, you're coming home." She smiled, tears stinging her eyes, unsure if it was joy or fear. Outside, a storm gathered over Texas skies. Thunder rolled like a warning she couldn't quite hear. By morning, the sun would rise over the Pacific, and Maggie Cole would be gone, chasing the promise of love into the arms of a man she had never truly seen. Rain hammered against the rusted windows of a narrow apartment in Surabaya, the largest port city in eastern Indonesia. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and iron. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting Rian Surya's reflection across a cracked mirror. He studied himself as if he were a painting in progress, handsome in an ordinary way, but something in his stillness was wrong, too deliberate. He brushed back his hair, wiped a streak of crimson paint, or was it something else, from his knuckle, and opened his laptop. On the glowing screen, Margaret Cole's smiling face filled the frame. The message she'd sent an hour ago read, "Flight booked. 2 days to go. Can you believe it?" He didn't reply yet. Instead, he watched her recorded video again, pausing at the moment she laughed. He liked that sound, the fragility under it. It reminded him of glass right before it cracks. Beneath the table sat 3 finished canvases, turned to the wall. The backs were marked with neat handwriting. Uni 2023, May 2022, Sarah 2021. He ran his fingers along the edges, tender, almost reverent. "Soon," he whispered. "A new muse." The laptop chimed, a video call request from Maggie. He straightened his shirt, adjusted the lighting so the darker side of the room, the one with the tarp-covered table, remained unseen, then clicked accept. "Rian, you look tired," she said, cheerful and unaware. He smiled, soft and convincing. "Just working late, my love. I wanted to finish something before you arrive." "Your art?" "Yes," he said, glancing toward the covered shapes. "My most important piece yet." She blushed. "You make me sound like a painting." "You already are." For a moment, silence. The rain eased outside. The city hummed. Rian tilted his head, watching her face on the screen as if memorizing every line. "Do you trust me, Maggie?" "Of course I do." "Good," he said quietly. "Trust is rare. You'll see, it's beautiful here. Peaceful." When the call ended, his expression drained, replaced by the same hollow calm that lived in his eyes whenever he was alone. He shut the laptop, locking the screen like a door. He crossed the room to the window. Below, the alley shimmered with puddles. Somewhere, a stray dog barked and a motorbike buzzed past like an insect. Rian's gaze drifted to a steel sink in the corner. Inside lay a small bundle wrapped in plastic, dark stains blooming through. He turned away before the mind could form the full picture. At the opposite wall hung photographs of bodies, not dead, but posed, limbs arranged in stillness, painted over with color, as though beauty could disguise decay. To Rian it wasn't violence. It was preservation. The world forgot too easily. His art remembered. He sat, opened a worn journal, and began to write in precise, slanted handwriting. Subject number 4, Margaret Cole. Female, 58. Emotionally responsive. Deep loneliness paired with trust hunger. Predicted timeline, 3 weeks. He tapped the pen twice, thinking. Then beneath the notes, he added a single line. "Do not rush this one." A knock startled him. His landlady's voice seeped through the door. "Rian, police came again. Asking questions about the missing girl. You okay?" He smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Ibu. Just rumors." The footsteps retreated. He exhaled slowly, closing the notebook. From a drawer, he pulled a photograph, Maggie's profile picture printed on cheap paper. He pinned it to the wall above his easel, replacing the one labeled Uni. For a moment, he simply stared at it, the way a believer might face an altar. 2 days, he murmured almost lovingly. Then we begin. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the room for a single breath. In that split second, the shapes under the tarp became visible, vague, human outlines bound in shadow. Then darkness reclaimed them. Rian smiled again, lifted his brush, and dipped it into the crimson jar beside him. The plane dipped beneath the clouds, revealing a sprawl of green fields and silver rivers winding through the heat of Indonesia. Margaret pressed her hand to the window, heart pounding. The sunlight shimmered on the horizon like a promise. She hadn't felt this alive in years. The flight attendant's voice broke through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now approaching Surabaya." The words sent a rush through her chest, excitement tangled with fear. She touched her wedding band, still on a thin gold chain around her neck, and whispered, "Wish me luck, Henry." When the plane landed, humidity wrapped around her like wet silk. The air smelled of spice, exhaust, and ocean. People shouted in Bahasa Indonesia, laughter mingling with the blare of horns. Maggie felt small in the chaos but oddly exhilarated, as if she'd stepped into someone else's life. Then she saw him. Rian stood near the exit gate, holding a single white orchid. He looked even more handsome in person, taller, quieter, his skin glowing in the tropical light. When their eyes met, something inside her unclenched. "Maggie," he said softly. His accent stretched her name like music. She laughed nervously. "You're real." He smiled, brushing his thumb gently over her hand. "More real than anything you've ever known." He guided her through the crowded terminal, protective yet strangely distant. His hand never left hers, but his eyes kept flicking around the crowd, watchful. Outside, he loaded her suitcase into a black sedan. The driver nodded at him, silent. As the car wound through narrow streets, Maggie stared out at vendors selling fruit and garlands, children running barefoot, and scooters darting between lanes. She felt like she'd fallen into a dream. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's home," Rian replied. "A place where people can start again." His tone was soft, but something in it made her glance at him. His eyes fixed ahead, unreadable. The drive ended at a secluded house beyond the city, hidden behind tall palms and a rusting iron gate. The building was larger than she expected, white paint peeling, vines crawling along the veranda. The windows were shuttered despite the heat. Rian turned to her. "It's not much. Old house. But it keeps secrets well." She laughed at his phrasing, thinking it was a joke. "I'm just grateful to be here." He carried her bag inside. The air was cool but heavy with a faint scent of paint and something metallic beneath it. The living room was sparsely furnished. 2 chairs, a canvas on an easel, and several locked doors lining the hallway. "Where's everyone else?" she asked. "No one else lives here," he replied, setting her luggage down. "Just me." He led her to a small guest room overlooking the garden. The walls were bare except for a single painting. A woman's silhouette, faceless, her body turned away. Maggie studied it. "She looks lonely." "She's waiting," Rian said. He smiled then, that same soft, perfect smile that had once melted her through the screen. But in person, it carried a strange edge, too composed, too still. That night, they ate by candlelit. He'd prepared rice, grilled fish, and fresh mango. The atmosphere felt romantic, yet something about the silence between them pressed against her chest. When she reached for her glass, she noticed a faint reddish stain on the table's corner. Paint, maybe. She told herself it was nothing. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her distant look. "Just tired." "Jet lag," she said, forcing a smile. He leaned closer, voice low. "Sleep. Tomorrow, I'll show you the ocean. It's only an hour away." Maggie nodded, comforted. But later, when she lay in bed, she heard him moving in the hallway. A door clicked open, then closed, then another. She turned toward the window, clutching the orchid he'd given her, its petals trembling in the faint wind. Somewhere below, in the darkness, came a soft metallic clink, like a chain shifting against stone. Sunlight crept through thin curtains, slicing across the room like quiet knives. Maggie woke to the sound of birds and distant waves. For a fleeting moment, she forgot where she was. Then the smell returned, a strange blend of paint, sea salt, and iron. She rose slowly, noticing her suitcase had been moved closer to the door. A small breakfast tray sat on the nightstand, tropical fruit, bread, and a single handwritten note. "Went out for supplies. Don't wander too far. Some doors are fragile." The phrasing unsettled her. Fragile doors? She smiled anyway, convincing herself it was just his odd humor. Padding through the house, she felt its weight. Every creak, every shadow seemed alive. Dust floated in shafts of light that barely reached the floor. The air was too still, too careful. Rian's studio door was locked. She tried the handle out of innocent curiosity, but it didn't budge. Another door down the hallway bore deep scratches near the knob, like something had scraped to get out. She froze, heart tightening. Then came the soft purr of the front gate. Rian's voice floated in. "Maggie? You awake?" She quickly stepped away from the door, pretending to admire a painting on the wall, a faceless woman sitting by the sea. "I was just exploring," she said as he entered. His smile was quick, controlled. "I told you this house is old. Some places aren't safe. Rotten floors, sharp tools. I wouldn't want you hurt. He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead, his touch light but possessive. You trust me, yes? She nodded, though her pulse betrayed her. Later, over coffee, he grew strangely reflective. You know, he said, staring into his cup, people think artists create from beauty. But true art comes from pain. From what we hide. She watched him carefully. And what do you hide, Rian? He looked up, smiling faintly. Only what the world can't understand. Outside, rain began to fall, a rhythmic tapping against the roof. He turned on soft jazz, humming as he painted in silence. Maggie sat nearby, pretending to read, but her eyes wandered to the edges of the room, where drops of dried red spattered the floorboards, disguised as pigment. By afternoon, he'd gone out again. The moment the gate shut, she rose, drawn by unease. She tried another door, the one beside the stairs. It creaked open a few inches before stopping against something heavy. The smell that escaped was damp and chemical, like old metal and decay. She covered her mouth. Through the gap, she saw something glint, glass jars on shelves, faintly lit by a single bulb. Inside one, something pale floated in murky liquid. She couldn't tell if it was paint, wax, or flesh. A floorboard groaned behind her. She spun. Rian stood at the end of the hall, soaked from rain, expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither spoke. You shouldn't open doors that aren't yours, he said softly. Her throat tightened. I thought it was the bathroom. He smiled, stepping closer. You're trembling. Why? I'm just cold. He reached out, wiping a drop of rain from her cheek, though it wasn't rain at all, it was sweat. This house, he whispered, keeps secrets for me. And now for you. Then, as quickly as the tension rose, he kissed her forehead and walked away. Dinner soon, he said over his shoulder. After that, I'll show you something beautiful. When he disappeared into his studio, Maggie stood frozen, every nerve screaming. She wanted to run, but where? The road outside was endless, lined with palms and silence. That night, she lay awake listening to faint scraping from below, rhythmic, patient, metallic. The sound of something being sharpened. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, clutching the small orchid he'd given her like a talisman. In the dark, she imagined the locked door downstairs, and what waited behind it. Morning came heavy and gray. Rain had washed the night clean, but the air inside the house still carried that faint, metallic scent, the one Maggie could no longer ignore. She moved quietly through the living room, where half-finished canvases leaned against the wall like silent witnesses. Rian was nowhere in sight. His car keys were gone, and his phone charger lay coiled on the table. The absence felt both a relief and a warning. She brewed coffee to steady her nerves, but her hands shook as she poured. The events of the night before replayed in her mind. The door, the smell, his voice in the hallway. She tried to convince herself she was overreacting, that maybe he really was just an eccentric artist. But then her eyes caught something wedged beneath the old sofa. A small corner of glossy paper, curled from moisture. She knelt, tugging it free. It was a Polaroid, a young woman smiling under a bright Indonesian sun, standing beside Rian. He had one arm around her shoulders, the same arm that had held Maggie last night. On the back, written in careful cursive, were 3 words. You're my muse. The handwriting was identical to the note he'd left that morning. A chill crawled down her spine. She flipped the photo again. Behind the woman's smile, something faint, a shadow, a shape half cropped out of frame, looked like a large sheet hung on a clothesline. But the stains on it weren't laundry. Footsteps echoed on the gravel outside. Maggie's heart lurched. She slid the photo into her pocket just as the gate creaked open. Rian entered, carrying a basket of fruit. You're up early, he said cheerfully. Did you sleep well? She forced a smile. Better than I expected. He placed the basket on the table, his eyes studying her face longer than necessary. You seem nervous. Jet lag, she murmured. He nodded slowly. The house takes time to get used to. Some people feel it watching them. Her stomach twisted. Some people? He chuckled, peeling a mango. Previous guests. Models. Artists come, They stay a while. But they always leave when their part is finished. She tried to sound casual. Is that what Uni was? The knife paused mid-slice. A thin thread of juice, or was it blood, ran down his hand. Where did you hear that name? She froze. You mentioned her once, I think. He wiped his hand on a towel, eyes cold now. Uni was special. But she didn't understand me. What happened to her? She left. His voice dropped to a whisper. They all leave. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. The rest of the day moved in fragments. He painted in silence while she pretended to read by the window. Each brushstroke sounded deliberate, almost surgical. Maggie could feel him watching her between movements, as if memorizing her posture, her breath, her fear. By late afternoon, the tension became unbearable. She slipped into the hallway under the guise of fetching water. From the crack beneath the studio door, a faint light glowed, orange, flickering. She could hear something dripping steadily inside, rhythmic and wet. She pressed her ear to the wood. A faint hum. His voice speaking to someone or something. Hold still, you'll ruin the lines. Maggie stumbled back, heart hammering. The photo in her pocket felt like fire. She had to leave. But the front door was locked from the outside. When Rian appeared again, his shirt spattered with dark stains, he said softly, "Tomorrow, I'll show you my latest masterpiece. It's almost finished." She nodded weakly, forcing a trembling smile. That night, she lay awake, clutching the Polaroid under her pillow. The woman's eyes in the picture seemed to stare back, pleading. Outside, thunder rolled again, and from somewhere deep below the floor came a soft, dragging sound, like something heavy being moved. The night refused to end. Maggie lay motionless, the Polaroid clutched in her trembling hand, listening to the steady rhythm beneath the floorboards. Every creak of the house felt alive, breathing, whispering, remembering. She waited until the first gray streaks of dawn crept through the curtains before daring to move. Rian was gone again. His car was not in the driveway. The silence that filled the villa was heavier than before, like the air before a storm. She knew this was her only chance. She dressed quickly, heart pounding in her throat. The hallway to the locked studio stretched longer than it had ever seemed, the faded portraits along the walls staring as she passed. Each painting, women, all of them, shared the same eyes. Eyes that looked too real. At the studio door, she hesitated. The brass lock gleamed dully in the light. Rian's voice from the night before echoed in her memory. "Tomorrow, I'll show you my masterpiece." Her shaking hands searched for something to force the lock. She found a thin metal rod from a cleaning brush and pushed it into the keyhole. A soft click. The door creaked open. The smell hit her first, metallic, thick, and sweet. Not paint. Blood. Sunlight spilled through the high windows, illuminating chaos. Easels lined the room, each draped with large white sheets splattered with crimson. Paintbrushes floated in cloudy jars. On the central table lay open sketchbooks filled with women's faces, dozens of them, drawn with haunting precision. Then she saw the one in the center. A massive canvas stood before her, half-finished. The figure on it was unmistakably her. Same necklace. Same posture. The likeness was chilling. The background was streaked in red, and where the paint ended, something darker stained the floor below. Her knees nearly buckled. She stepped closer, and froze. Beneath the edge of the canvas, a puddle had dried into a dark crust, trailing toward a covered shape in the corner. She reached out, hesitated, then pulled the sheet away. A woman's body lay curled beneath it. The same face from the Polaroid, Uni. Her skin had turned pale marble, her arms stiff. Her hair was matted with dried pigment. Maggie gasped, stumbling backward, her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. The walls seemed to close in. Her pulse roared in her ears. She backed away, and knocked over a jar of solvent. The sound shattered the silence. Footsteps approached outside. She darted behind a curtain just as the door handle turned. Rian stepped in, humming softly, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. His hands were stained with fresh color, or blood. He paused, sniffing the air. "You've been here, haven't you?" His tone was calm, almost tender. Curiosity is dangerous, Maggie. She held her breath as he walked closer to the canvas, unwrapping the bundle. Inside were strips of fabric, no skin. He began cutting them into smaller pieces, mixing them with a thick crimson liquid in a jar. My art, he whispered, is life itself. When he turned toward the table, his eyes narrowed. The Polaroid she had dropped lay near the puddle. His calm expression melted into fury. Where are you? She bolted from behind the curtain, shoving past him. He grabbed her wrist. The jar shattered, splattering red across them both. You don't understand, he shouted. They all wanted to be immortal. I gave them that. She screamed, twisting free, and slammed the door behind her. She ran down the hall, tripping, scraping her knees, fumbling for the exit, but again, the front door was locked tight. Rian's footsteps thundered after her. Maggie! His voice was raw now, animalistic. Don't ruin this. She darted into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and faced the corridor. The pounding stopped. Silence again. Then a soft laugh. I'll finish you tonight, he whispered through the walls. My final muse. The lights flickered. The air turned still. Somewhere deep inside the studio, the dripping started again. Slower, heavier. Maggie slid down the wall, knife trembling in her hands, tears streaking her cheeks. She realized there was no one coming to save her. Not here. Not in this house. Outside, the wind howled against the windows like a warning. Night draped itself over the villa like a shroud. Maggie sat motionless on the floor of the kitchen, the knife still in her shaking hand. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The air was thick with the smell of turpentine and blood, blending into something unholy. Somewhere upstairs, the floor creaked. She forced herself to stand. Her body ached from the fall, her mind spinning between terror and disbelief. The man she thought she loved, the man who painted sunsets and quoted poetry, was a monster who used flesh as pigment. Her eyes darted to the clock above the fridge, 7:14 p.m. They were supposed to have dinner an hour ago. Rian had told her earlier that morning, "Tonight, I'll cook for you, something special, something no one's ever tasted before." A chill crawled down her spine. The words now carried a new, dreadful meaning. She checked the windows. Bolted. The back door, padlocked from outside. She turned toward the hallway, where faint light flickered beneath the dining room door. She crept closer, silent but trembling. Her reflection in the glass cabinet stared back at her, wild-eyed, streaked with tears and blood. The dining room was set for two. Crystal glasses gleamed under the chandelier. 2 plates sat side by side, each with a covered silver dome. A candle burned low, its wax running like veins down the holder. On the table lay a folded note with her name written in bold strokes of crimson paint. She picked it up, hands shaking. My dearest Maggie, art is not about what we see, it's about what we consume. Tonight, you will become part of me as they did. Are. Her throat constricted. The metallic scent from beneath the domes grew stronger. She reached forward and lifted one slowly. Inside, a slab of meat, raw, red, and arranged delicately, glistened under the candlelight. For a horrifying second, she thought it was beef. Then she saw the small tattooed line of a bracelet mark near the edge. It wasn't. Maggie gagged, dropping the lid, which clattered loudly on the floor. The candle flickered out. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Leaving before dinner? Rian's voice called softly, almost playful. She spun around, the knife raised. He stood in the doorway, shirt half unbuttoned, hair damp as if from a shower. His eyes shimmered with something between tenderness and madness. You ruined my studio, he said, stepping closer. You ruined her. Do you know how hard it is to find beauty that doesn't run? Stay back, Maggie warned, her voice breaking. Rian smiled sadly. You still don't understand. I wasn't going to hurt you, Maggie. You were supposed to complete me. He reached for the table knife, holding it like a painter holds a brush. We were supposed to share this meal, my gift, my truth. She took a step back toward the hallway, every muscle ready to sprint. You're insane, she whispered. He tilted his head. Maybe. But art always demands sacrifice. Then the lights went out. Panic surged through her. She stumbled backward in darkness, knocking over a chair. Rian's footsteps moved closer, calm, deliberate. The knife in her hand glinted as lightning flashed through the window. She swung wildly and felt it scrape something, not flesh but wood. He laughed quietly. "You can't escape me, Maggie." Her trembling fingers found the lighter on the counter and flicked it on. In its small orange glow, she saw the outline of the back door key, hanging just above the spice rack. Hope flared for the first time in hours. But when she looked back, Rian was gone. The candle on the table reignited by itself, its flames steady and bright, as if mocking her. On the plate where the meat had been, a single note now lay folded neatly. "If you leave before midnight, I'll make sure you never leave at all." She grabbed the key, bolted toward the back of the house, and ran. Outside, the rain began to fall in sheets, turning the garden soil into red-tinged mud. Somewhere behind her, the villa door creaked open again. And this time, Rian didn't call her name. He was already following. Rain hammered against the roof like gunfire as Maggie sprinted through the garden, her feet sinking into the mud. Her nightgown clung to her skin, heavy with water and fear. She didn't dare look back, though she could hear Rian's slow, steady footsteps echoing through the downpour, calm, measured, like a predator that knew his prey had nowhere left to run. Lightning slashed across the sky, revealing the outline of the dense trees surrounding the villa. Maggie stumbled toward them, clutching the cold metal key like her only lifeline. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The key had to open something, maybe a gate, maybe a shed, anything that could get her away from that house. She spotted a faint structure ahead, a small wooden cabin near the fence. The door resisted at first but then gave way. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of gasoline and damp wood. Tools hung neatly on the wall. A single bulb flickered weakly above. Maggie slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. Her entire body shook. She looked around frantically, a radio, an old phone charger, and on the work table, Rian's phone. Her heart stopped. He must have dropped it here earlier. She grabbed it, praying it wasn't locked. The screen blinked to life with a fingerprint prompt. Then, miraculously, unlocked automatically. His thumb must have activated it in her panicked struggle earlier. She opened the messages. Her blood froze. Dozens of conversations, women. Each thread filled with the same promises Rian had made to her. "My muse. My last love. Come visit me." The final messages in each thread were identical, delivered. No reply. And then, silence. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the photos. Faces of women, smiling, happy, unaware. Then pictures of paintings. Each portrait was one of them. Tears blurred her vision. But she couldn't stop now. She needed to find help. She switched to the call log, no signal. The cabin's tin roof and the storm made it impossible. She turned on the flashlight and opened the back window slightly, raising the phone toward the sky, desperate for even one bar of service. Then a flicker, 1 bar. Her heart raced. She quickly opened her messages and typed, hands shaking violently. "Help. I'm in Ubud, near a villa with red gates and a stone statue at the entrance. Man named Rian. He's killed women. Please, someone." The message hung for a moment, sending failed. She cursed under her breath, tried again. The wind howled louder. She climbed onto the work table, stretching her arm toward the open gap in the roof where rain poured in. Rian's voice echoed faintly outside. "Maggie, come back inside. You'll get sick out there." Her breath hitched. He was close. The phone vibrated. Message sent. A sob escaped her throat, part relief, part disbelief. She ducked under the table, gripping the knife she'd carried since the kitchen. Footsteps approached the cabin. The handle rattled. "Maggie," he said softly, "you're ruining the ending." He kicked the door. Twice. The wood cracked. Maggie's pulse pounded in her ears. She crawled toward the small back window and squeezed through, the knife clattering beside her into the mud. She crawled through the bushes, scraping her arms, her breaths shallow and sharp. In the distance, faint sirens wailed through the rain, distant but real. For the first time, hope burned through the fear. Someone had seen the message. Behind her, the cabin door burst open. Rian stepped into the rain, eyes scanning the trees, the knife gleaming under the stormlight. He shouted her name, voice breaking into something wild and desperate. "You can't leave me. You were supposed to be the last one." Maggie didn't look back. She ran toward the faint red and blue flashes flickering through the mist. Then suddenly, silence. The sirens stopped. The rain softened. The lights faded. Maggie slowed, confused. The forest around her was empty again. No cars, no people, no sound. Only the steady hum of rain. Her heart plummeted. She looked down at the phone. The screen was black. And from somewhere behind her, she heard Rian whisper, impossibly close. "I told you, Maggie. No one leaves before midnight." The forest had swallowed the world. Only the hiss of the rain remained, soft now, almost tender, masking every sound except Maggie's ragged breathing. Her lungs burned, her bare feet slipped against the soaked leaves, but she couldn't stop. She didn't know which way led to the road, which way back to the villa. Every tree looked the same, tall, black silhouettes pressing closer, whispering in the wind. Her phone was dead, the last glow of its screen fading like a dying heartbeat. She stuffed it into her pocket, clutching the knife with both hands. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, yet the air felt heavier than before, charged with something that wasn't weather. It was him. She could feel Rian watching. A distant crack of a branch snapped her stillness. She spun around, knife raised, but saw only darkness. Then, another sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps, circling. "Rian," she whispered, though she didn't mean to say his name. It slipped out like a reflex, the name of the man who'd once made her feel wanted. No answer. Only silence, a silence that roared louder than any scream. Maggie pressed her back against a tree, heart pounding so hard she thought it might betray her. Her body trembled from exhaustion, from cold, from the cruel realization that even if the police had seen her message, they might be hours away. And she didn't have hours. A faint glimmer appeared ahead, the reflection of light through the trees. She stumbled toward it, her knees weak, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The trees opened into a small clearing. There, barely visible, stood a half-collapsed hut, its walls blanketed in moss and vines. She hesitated, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voice. Just the steady drip of rain off the leaves. She slipped inside. The air was thick with decay. Rusted tins, shattered glass, old canvases stacked against the wall, and in the corner, a lantern still flickering. She frowned. It couldn't have been burning long. Someone had been here. She lifted the lantern and froze. Across the room, scrawled in dark red paint, or blood, on the wall were the words, "You were never supposed to leave." Her throat closed. She staggered backward, the lantern trembling in her grip. The walls were lined with photographs, women again. The same women she'd seen on Rian's phone. But these photos weren't of them smiling. They were taken after. Maggie dropped the lantern. It rolled across the floor, casting ghostly shadows. A soft voice whispered behind her. "I told you. I make art that lasts." She spun. Rian stood in the doorway, soaked, barefoot, his face eerily calm. The rain plastered his hair against his forehead, his eyes glowing faintly in the lantern light. "Why, Maggie?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "Why run? You were perfect. You felt real." She backed against the wall, knife trembling in her hand. "You killed them," she whispered. "You killed all of them." He smiled faintly. "No. I immortalized them. And you were supposed to be my redemption." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, and for the first time, she saw the tremor in his jaw, the flicker of something broken behind the calm. For a heartbeat, he looked almost human. Then his gaze hardened. "But you ruined it." He lunged. Maggie screamed, slashing blindly. The blade sliced across his arm. He howled, staggering back. She used the moment to dart past him, stumbling into the rain again. The forest swallowed her once more. Behind her, his voice broke into the night, not shouting but whispering. "Maggie, the world will forget you. But I won't. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing in the mud. The forest was silent again. So silent it made her ears ache. For a moment, she thought maybe he was gone. Maybe she'd escaped. Then, somewhere in the distance, a single camera shutter clicked. Dawn broke over the jungle with a dull gray light, muffled by clouds and lingering storm. The forest seemed to exhale, as if it had watched the night unfold and now held its breath in mourning. Maggie crouched behind a fallen tree, mud and rain streaked across her face. Her fingers were raw from branches and thorns, her body trembling from exhaustion, but she had survived. So far. Through the mist, the faint sound of engines reached her ears. Police cars. She exhaled shakily, unsure whether it was relief or disbelief. She crawled toward the clearing, eyes scanning for signs of life or death. When she emerged, flashing lights danced across the wet leaves. Officers shouted, their voices muffled by the storm's tail. Maggie ran toward them, waving her arms. "Maggie! Stop!" a uniformed officer called. She collapsed into their arms, gasping, barely able to form words. "Rienville, they killed." They caught her, wrapped her in a blanket, and ushered her toward a police vehicle. The rain had slowed, leaving the air cold and sharp. She glanced back toward the shadowed jungle. Somewhere in that darkness, Rian was still out there, watching, waiting. The officers led her to the villa, now cordoned off. The red gates stood eerily still, as though the house itself had been holding its breath for the police to arrive. Inside, the scene was a nightmare made visible. Easels leaned under their own weight, canvases partially draped with sheets. But the smell of blood and decay had seeped into the walls and floorboards. Detective Sari, a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, stepped forward. "You're safe now," she said softly, guiding Maggie toward a chair. "We'll take it from here." Maggie's gaze fell upon the first canvas. A woman's face, vibrant, smiling, almost alive, stared back at her. She recognized the eyes immediately, Uni. And next to it, other portraits, each woman he had captured, immortalized in paint. But the brushstrokes were more than beautiful, they were terrifyingly accurate. Their features were frozen in subtle anguish, and the crimson stains on some of the canvases mirrored the violence she had glimpsed firsthand. Rian's art was not just paint. It was a record, a confession. Detectives whispered in the background, examining jars, notebooks, and scattered photographs. Each item confirmed what Maggie had seen in her terror: meticulous planning, obsession, and an eerie consistency. Faces of the living turned into subjects of a macabre gallery. Sari crouched beside Maggie. "These are all alive when he paints them?" she asked quietly. Maggie's hands trembled. "Sometimes he kills afterward. But he keeps them here, their faces, their eyes. It's like he's trying to save them from being forgotten." The detective nodded slowly, understanding the gravity. "He's a collector, but of life and death both." Maggie's attention shifted to the canvas that had once terrified her most, her own likeness. The brushstrokes were nearly complete. Her own fear, captured in oils, frozen for eternity. She felt bile rise in her throat. Suddenly, one of the officers called out, "Detective Sari, there's someone else. He left a note." Sari approached, unfolding a small sheet of paper. Written in Rian's familiar slanted handwriting were the words, "She survived. For now. But every portrait has its place. Remember, the living can still be finished." Maggie stared at the note, her body still shaking, the threat hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Rian had escaped, somewhere beyond the villa, beyond the forest, and he was already planning his next masterpiece. The sound of a helicopter approached, its rotors slicing through the silence. Officers began photographing the scene while Maggie wrapped herself in blankets, shivering. She realized something impossible. She was alive, yet she would never truly be free. The villa, the paintings, and Rian's obsession would follow her, haunting her dreams. As she looked over at her own unfinished portrait, her reflection captured in the canvas' glossy surface, she whispered to herself, "I won't let him finish me." The first light of dawn revealed the villa in full, an abandoned monument to obsession, but also a warning. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows beyond the trees, Rian's silhouette watched, waiting. 2 years had passed since Maggie fled the villa, since the police had finally captured Rian in a small coastal town hundreds of kilometers from Ubud. His arrest made international headlines. The Indonesian painter killer, they called him. They catalogued his works, the jars, the photographs, the horrors behind the canvases. And yet, Maggie never felt truly free. Even behind bars, Rian's presence lingered. He was kept in a high-security prison, confined to a single cell, yet he found ways to reach her. Letters arrived through official channels, handwritten on thin, lined paper. Each one was carefully phrased, unervingly polite, yet filled with the same obsession that had once consumed the villa. You survived because you were clever. But survival is temporary. I see your shadow in every reflection, Maggie. You are my final muse, whether you like it or not. Maggie kept the letters hidden in a locked drawer. She refused to respond, though curiosity clawed at her every time. The words haunted her, each sentence meticulously designed to provoke unease, to remind her of the villa, the portraits, the smell of paint and blood. She had returned to the United States, attempting to rebuild a life that felt permanently fractured. Friends, work, even quiet evenings at home felt suffocating now, because in every mirror, every reflective surface, she half expected to see his eyes staring back. One rainy evening, 2 letters arrived at once. She opened them with trembling hands. Art is eternal. I have learned patience. I am writing, painting, planning. The world has changed, but the rules have not. You are alive. Yet alive is fragile. The second letter contained a folded photograph, not of a victim, not of a canvas, but of her apartment window. The rain-streaked glass, her own curtains slightly parted. Someone had been watching. Maggie sank into her chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The memory of the villa, of the locked doors and dripping floors, pressed back into her chest. She realized in that instant that Rian's art had never been about killing. It had been about control. About proving that even freedom was an illusion. She thought of Uni and the other women whose faces he had immortalized, and of her own reflection in the painting he never completed. Each was frozen in time, captured by obsession, yet some had survived. Some, like her, carried the burden of memory. She burned the letters in the fireplace. The flames curled around the edges, consuming ink and paper, yet a hollow feeling lingered, as if nothing could truly erase him. Outside, the night was quiet, the storm finally spent. But in the shadows, behind closed doors, she knew he still existed. In his cell, in his mind, on paper, Rian continued to write, to paint, to wait. And somewhere deep inside her, Maggie understood a terrifying truth. Some art never dies. Some muses never escape. And as she stared into the dying embers, she whispered to herself, a mixture of defiance and dread. I survived. But he still lives, in words, in shadows, in the memory of all he touched. The wind shifted, rattling the window pane. Outside the world was still. But Maggie knew the story was not over. It had simply changed forms.